Texas State Representative Gina Hinojosa. She is running for governor of Texas. State representatives, I want to read you just a little bit of what we know about the Dilley Detention Center. These are details that date back to September. They were part of a lawsuit. The government is attempting to end protections for children. You had declarations from families at Dilley, and they described persistently cloudy water, delayed medical attention, long periods of time where children are being detained. How does that comport with what you heard today from your colleagues who were able to access the facility?
Those conditions that you just listed out, anywhere else in the United States of America, people would be prosecuted for child abuse. In the state of Texas, the only place in the country, our governor licenses these places and allows for children to be incarcerated with their parents. It is inhumane, it is morally corrupt, and it is really happening because of a culture of corruption that plague our state and that drive Greg Abbott.
Drives Greg Abbott. I don't know what the hell we're talking about here. Be honest with you, Congresswoman, I have no idea. We have a 5-year-old kid in detention that they tried to deport. This government tried to deport. They used him as bait. And Americans are sitting around fat and happy at the kitchen table watching it on TV. And what's your response to that, folks? A 5-year-old. And here's the thing. I want you picked up on Greg Abbott. I want to play Greg Abbott's response because right now he thinks there needs to be a recalibration. I wonder why. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We need to have respect for law enforcement officers in the country. ICE, they are law enforcement officers. And so they, being the White House, need to recalibrate on what needs to be done to make sure that that respect is going to be reinstilled, and that's not an easy task, especially under the current circumstances. But I know that they're working on a game plan to make sure that they are going to, let's say, recalibrate and maybe work from a different direction to ensure that they get back to what they wanted to do to begin with, and that is to remove people from the country who are here illegally.
Alphabet soup of BS. Because they wouldn't, if you didn't build a facility in the first place, if you didn't countenance the crazy coming out of the White House as the governor of a freestanding state and said, no, we're not going to play this game. We're not going to treat immigrants this way. We're not going to treat children this way. That's the recalibration, Governor. I'll give you the moment, Congressman, because I don't know what we're doing here. I just don't get it.
What is happening in Texas and happening across this country, but mostly in Texas, is that now we have the private prisons who are making money off every person that is being detained, even children, right? So now there are these profit motives that are driving these raids. They're also driving the incarceration of our children and our families. Greg Abbott allowed for the licensing of these children and their parents, the only state in the union that allows this. This happened after he received tens of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from these private prisons. Now they're talking about expanding detention centers and converting, in fact, an Amazon warehouse to store and warehouse human beings. That is the corrupt reality that we are dealing with in Texas. It is sick. And let me tell you right now, when we were at that press conference hearing the story of these children, it was all anybody could do but to keep a dry eye. It is awful what is happening to these children.
No, Congresswoman, I don't think I've heard it pointed out yet. Pardon me, State Rep. Why are we trying to make you a congresswoman tonight? Not you running for governor. We're trying to make you a congresswoman.
Look, I'm just elevating the game. That's all. That's all.
State Representative Hinojosa, some of these children in the facility are American citizens. And their parents may be undocumented, but some of these children are Americans. The United States government is detaining minor Americans, American children, in subpar, to be kind, facilities.
Campaigning for something instead of just campaigning against something. Donald Trump and the Republicans have fumbled the football. but that football is not going to run itself into the end zone. That's going to be on us. And so our campaign is putting forward a vision of how we can make life more affordable, how we can combat corruption and make government work for us again, how we can fight for education and healthcare and housing. These are all things that I've been able to win on in the Texas legislature as a Democrat in a Republican-dominated body. I've been able to score real victories for working people, and I want to take those fights to the U.S. Senate so that we can actually deliver results for folks here in Texas and across the country.
Hey, James, it's Tim Miller with the Bulwark and MS Now. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year. Eamon mentioned in the intro there that Democrats haven't won statewide in Texas in 30 years. And I'm just kind of wondering, as you look back at some of those past races, I mentioned Beto's race in 2018 where he lost by only 3 points. What do you see as things that have almost worked for Democrats that you want to borrow from? And what about things that you want to do differently? I mean, doing the same thing over and over again and just getting the same results is the definition of insanity. What do you think you can do different than some of the past Democratic candidates who haven't won?
Well, I know we've all had our hearts broken by Texas many times before, mostly those of us who live here, because we're the ones who have to live under this extremism and this corruption. And if you look at the last 15, 20 years in Texas, statewide campaigns have gotten more competitive, not less. We haven't broken through yet. We haven't won a statewide race yet, but the trend line is moving in our direction. I remember when I was growing up in Texas, Republicans would win by 25, 30 points statewide. Now they consistently win by single digits. So I think to actually break through and finally get that statewide win, we've got to do a few things. We've got to energize Democrats. We've got to bring in new voters, particularly young voters. And then we've got to peel off some independents and even some Republicans. If we can do all of those things, I think we have a real shot at winning here. And I will just tell you, Tim, I have done this before. I got elected to the State House by flipping a Trump district that Democrats hadn't won in 30 years in Williamson County, Texas. And I was able to build a big coalition, a big tent that produced a victory with 51% of the vote. And I think that's what we're going to have to do statewide if we're going to win this Senate seat.
So to follow up on that, and you talked about energizing new voters, James, 2025 was the year that Texans watched the Republican-controlled legislature pass a new map, as demanded by Donald Trump, to basically hand the Republicans up to 5 more House seats in the midterms. Is this something that you hear from daily when you're speaking to Texan voters? And do you think that is going to backfire against Republicans in your state? Could that be a factor that brings out people to the polls?
Absolutely. I led the quorum break over the summer when my fellow Texas Democrats and I left our state and went to Chicago to shine a national spotlight on this redistricting power grab. And in the process, we inspired millions of Americans, including folks in other states like California, to get in the fight and to push back against this kind of corruption. We usually think corruption is something that involves money, and that's true a lot of the time, but corruption is really just the betrayal of the public's trust. And that's what we've seen in this redistricting power grab. Folks who are in power, like Donald Trump, they want to hang on to power at all costs. And so they are trying to subvert the public's will at the ballot box. And so I think you're going to see lots of folks showing up in this next election to push back against this kind of corruption. Young people in particular. If I'm elected as the next U.S. Senator from Texas, I'll be the youngest U.S. Senator in America. And so I think my fellow millennials, but also Gen Z, are ready for a new generation to step up.
Congressman Castro says he's being told some detainees at the facility are being kept on lockdown in their rooms. CNN senior national correspondent Ed Lavandera is outside the facility in Dilley, Texas. Ed, the congressman said he planned to meet with the father and son. Tell us what you've learned.
Well, we know that according to what the congressman told us, that he was going to be arriving here around 11 o'clock this morning. We're now 3.5 hours into this visit. We have not gotten any updates from the facility. Meanwhile, outside of the facility, this tension kind of escalating here as a large group of protesters have marched from Dilley into the area. And now state troopers in riot gear have been brought in to start pushing the crowd back. This group of protesters was much larger just a little while ago. The majority of them have left and kind of started marching back toward town. But here on the edge and the entrance into this detention facility, there are still a smaller group of hardline protesters they're probably about 30 or 40 feet into the property here belonging to the detention facility. And authorities have been telling them for probably the better part of an hour to scoot back. And just a little while ago, a group of, well, now it's starting to get tense.
Yeah, so Trump thought Texas was going to be his safety net, his firewall, his big "don't worry guys, I rigged the map, we're safe" plan. And now a bunch of judges in El Paso just took that firewall, lit it on fire, and chucked it in the Rio Grande. This is wild. There has not been some giant Texas election loss in the last 48 hours, but politically, the Texas GOP just got punched in the face in federal court. And they did it to themselves. Here's the story. Trump is looking at 2026, and he is scared. He knows his House majority is already hanging by a thread. Members are resigning. Marjorie Taylor Greene is gone. Special elections are popping up. Impeachment resolutions are literally written and sitting in a drawer, just waiting for Democrats to take the gavel. So he comes up with a genius plan: force Texas to redraw its congressional map in the middle of the decade to squeeze out as many extra Republican seats as possible. No new census, no normal tenure process. Just a mid-decade power grab. The Texas Tribune says Trump personally urged Texas Republicans to do this rare mid-decade redistricting, with the goal of creating 5 new GOP-leaning congressional districts. The memos from his team are clear. Texas is the firewall. If they can push the state from about 25 Republican-held House seats up to around 30 out of 38, Democrats would have a much harder time flipping the U.S. House in 2026. That's the whole game. He's not just thinking about Texas. He's thinking about impeachment. One Texas Republican, Senator Phil King, flat out said it on the floor. "I'm convinced that if Texas does not take this action, there is an extreme risk that the Republican majority will be lost. If it does, the next 2 years will be nothing but inquisitions and impeachments." That's their own words. They know exactly what's at stake. Lose the House, get impeachment. So they rammed the map through. They drew lines that carved up booming Black and Hispanic suburbs, cracked communities around Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and jammed voters of color into as few districts as possible so they could turn swing seats into solid red ones. Civil rights groups sued immediately. Latino and Black voters said the map intentionally diluted their political power. Fast forward to November 17th, 2025. A 3-judge federal panel in El Paso drops the hammer. They block the new map from being used in the 2026 elections. Not tweak it, not scold them. Block it. The judges say plaintiffs are likely to prove that the plan is unconstitutional racial gerrymandering, that the map was designed to weaken Black and Hispanic voters in violation of the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. The Texas Tribune calls it a major blow for Republicans in Texas and nationally, who pushed through this unusual mid-decade redistricting at the behest of President Donald Trump. This is not some blue state judge freelancing. This is a 3-judge panel on the border saying, "You did this to shore up Trump's House majority, and you trampled civil rights law to do it." And here's the punchline. They did all of that, took all that heat, for a map that cannot even be used in 2026. Come on. Imagine being a Texas Republican reading that ruling. You sat through weeks of brutal debate. You tied your name to a blatantly partisan redraw. You literally said on the record you were doing it to stop inquisitions and impeachments. And then a federal court says, "Yeah, no, absolutely not." Back to the old map or a court-drawn version. That's the "we did all this and still might lose the House" moment. And the danger is not theoretical. While this mess is playing out, there's a real test coming this week. A January 31st runoff in North Texas Senate District 9, a seat Trump carried by more than 17 points in 2024. This district is deep Trump turf, safe red on paper. And yet, in a November special election, Democrat Taylor Remmet finished first with about 47.6% of the vote, just short of the 50% needed to win outright. 2 Republicans, Lee Wamsgans and John Huffman, split the rest. Now Remmet and Wamsgans are in a one-on-one runoff. Texas Signal and other local analysts are calling it potentially historic. If a Democrat flips a Trump Pleasant 17 district in North Texas, days after a court blocks Trump's Texas map, it's going to send shockwaves through the GOP. It's exactly the kind of upset Democrats are dreaming about. Proof that Trump's firewall is full of holes. So no, Republicans haven't officially lost that North Texas race yet, but their whole strategy is wobbling. The mid-decade map that was supposed to save Trump's majority is on ice. A court has called it likely unconstitutional. A deep red runoff is suddenly competitive. And Texas Republicans are stuck asking themselves the question in your title. We did all this at Trump's demand, and we still might lose the House? Yeah, that's exactly what's on the table. Let's unpack how Trump's Texas gamble happened, why the courts blew it up, and how that North Texas runoff fits into the bigger picture. Start with the math. The U.S. House right now is hanging by just a few seats. Republicans have a razor-thin majority. Some members have resigned. Others are eyeing Senate runs or Trump administration jobs. Democrats only need a small swing to take control in 2026. Trump knows this. He's literally telling House Republicans, if we don't win the midterms, I'll be impeached. So when he looked at the map, Texas stood out. It's big, it's growing. It sends 38 members to the House. In 2024, Republicans won the majority of those, but not by some crazy margin. Suburbs around Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio have been trending away from the GOP. Trump's team decided Texas was the place to add padding. The Texas Tribune's 5 stories to watch note that Trump pushed for a rare mid-decade redistricting, something Texas hasn't attempted since Tom DeLay's infamous mid-2000s map. The plan, draw roughly 5 new Republican-leaning congressional seats, pushing the delegation to about 30 Republicans and 8 Democrats. Internal memos quoted by New York Magazine said Trump's advisors saw Texas as the Firewall. If they could juice the GOP numbers there, Democrats would have to pick up more seats in harder places to flip the House. Texas Republicans, especially people like Senator Phil King, bought in. During debate, King warned that if Texas didn't act, the Republican majority will be lost, and the next Congress would be nothing but inquisitions and impeachments. That's not subtle. He was saying the quiet part out loud. This map is about protecting Trump from oversight and removal, not just about serving Texas voters. The map itself did what you'd expect. It cracked growing Black and Hispanic suburbs into multiple districts to dilute their voting power. It packed other communities of color into heavily Democratic seats, so the surrounding districts could be drawn whiter and more Republican. Civil rights groups, Latino organizations, Black churches, and voting rights lawyers sued almost immediately. They argued that the new map intentionally diluted minority voting strength in violation of the 14th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act. They pointed to population data showing that nearly all of Texas's growth over the last decade came from Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities. But the power grab gave most of the new clout to white Republican-leaning areas. The case landed in front of a 3-judge federal panel in El Paso. That's important because 3-judge panels are used for big, fast-tracked redistricting cases. Any appeal from that panel goes straight to the Supreme Court. On November 17, 2025, the panel issued a lengthy opinion. They didn't mince words. They granted a preliminary injunction blocking Texas from using the new map in the 2026 elections. They said plaintiffs were likely to prove that the map intentionally weakened Black and Hispanic voters to maximize Republican seats. They highlighted emails and legislative records showing mapmakers talking about racial data, not just party data. They noted that lawmakers ignored requests to create more minority opportunity districts, even where demographics supported it. The judges wrote that the plan cannot be explained by neutral criteria, and instead reflects an effort to entrench partisan advantage by diminishing the electoral influence of voters of color. That's classic racial gerrymandering language. As the Texas Tribune put it, the ruling is a major blow for Republicans in Texas and nationally, who pushed through this unusual mid-decade redistricting at the behest of President Donald Trump. It doesn't permanently settle the case, trial is still coming, but it stops the map from being used in 2026. That alone blows up Trump's timeline. He wanted a Trump-approved map in place for these midterms. Instead, unless the Supreme Court intervenes, Texas will have to revert to its old map or a court-drawn interim map that is likely more favorable to Democrats than Trump's design. Meanwhile, politics doesn't wait for court appeals. On the ground, Democrats are already testing how vulnerable the Texas GOP is, even under the old lines. Enter Senate District 9. This is a Texas State Senate seat in North Texas, not a U.S. House seat, but it's a perfect bellwether. Trump carried SD 9 by more than 17 points in 2024. This is deep red territory, a place Republicans thought they could ignore. In November 2025, a special election is held to fill a vacancy. Democrat Taylor Gerrymap runs hard on public education, abortion rights, and backlash to Trump's policies. 3 major candidates end up on the ballot: Gerrymap and 2 Republicans, Lee Wamsgans, a far-right activist, and John Huffman, a more traditional conservative mayor. The results stun everyone. Gerrymap finishes first with 47.6% of the vote. Wamsgans and Huffman split the Republican vote and trail behind. Gerrymap is just a couple of points away from winning a Trump-pleasant 17-seat outright. No runoff needed. That's how close it was. Now, because she didn't hit 50%, there is a runoff set for January 31st, 2026, between Wilmette and Wambsgans. Republicans are scrambling. Trump allies are pumping money and endorsements into the race to hold the seat. But Democrats smell blood. Groups like Texas Signal are calling the runoff historic if Wilmette pulls it off. Beto O'Rourke and other statewide figures are doing videos urging turnout, saying a January election is approaching, and this could be the upset that proves Texas is in play. Why does a state Senate race matter in a House story? Because it's a test of the exact kind of voter shift Democrats need under any map. If a Democrat can win in a district Trump took by 17 points, then suddenly all those safe House seats Trump tried to fortify with his illegal map start looking a lot less safe. It tells donors Texas is worth investing in. It tells national strategists, contest the suburbs, especially where Trump's wars, raids, and court losses have alienated voters of color. And it tells Texas Republicans, even your firewall is cracking. Add in the Senate primary for Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico, where polls show real enthusiasm for Democratic statewide candidates, and you've got a Texas political environment that doesn't look like 2010. It looks like a state that's shifting under Trump's feet, while judges strip away the map he was counting on to hold back the wave. So what does all this actually mean going forward for Trump's House majority, for impeachment, and for Texas politics? First, it turns Texas from a safety net into a liability. Trump's whole mid-decade redistricting push was about locking in control. Instead, it triggered a lawsuit that froze his map and gave Democrats a huge talking point. He tried to cheat the map and got caught. The three-judge panel's injunction means the 2026 elections there will not be run on a Trump-engineered supermap. That alone makes it easier for Democrats to pick up seats, or at least hold their ground, in a state he thought he had rigged in his favor. Second, it validates the warning from his own allies. Phil King said on the floor that without this map, the Republican majority will be lost, and that the next 2 years would be nothing but inquisitions and impeachments. That quote will haunt him. Because now they don't have the map, but they do have all the political damage from trying to pass it. Democrats can camp out on that line. Even Texas Republicans believe that losing Texas means losing the House, and losing the House means impeachment. That's a clean, easy way to explain the stakes to voters across the country. Third, it shows that the backlash Trump is facing in places like Minnesota is also alive in Texas. The El Paso panel didn't just say the map was partisan. They said it likely violated the rights of Black and Hispanic voters. At the same time, Texas voters are watching his Venezuela war, his ICE raids, the killings in Minnesota, and his slow walk of the Epstein files. Latino and Black communities in Texas are not blind to that. The more Trump leans into hardline immigration and foreign military adventures, the more he risks alienating exactly the voters he just tried to carve up with this map. A blocked gerrymander plus energized voters of color is a bad combo for the GOP. Fourth, the North Texas runoff is a warning shot. If Wilmette wins a Trump plus 17 seat, it tells us the political environment is far more favorable to Democrats than national pundits have been saying. Even if she loses but keeps it close, Republicans will have to spend money and energy defending seats they never thought about before. That stretches their resources thin in the House races too. It also sends a signal to candidate recruits. Texas districts you thought were unwinnable might suddenly be worth a run. That's how waves start, with an upset or a near upset that breaks the psychological dam. Fifth, it ties directly into Trump's personal fear, impeachment. He's already told his party what happens if they lose the House. I'll be impeached. The Texas map was his attempt to avoid that. Now it's off the board. If Democrats pick up seats in Texas under the old or a court-drawn map, that gets them closer to a majority. And if they win the House, all those impeachment resolutions about Venezuela, January 6th, war powers, and Epstein that you've been covering stop being theory and start being committee hearings and votes. Texas Republicans admitted as much. They told the world that their failure in this redistricting fight could lead to inquisitions and impeachments. Sixth, it also matters for the broader narrative about Trump and the rule of law. In Minnesota, judges are threatening his ICE chief with contempt and ordering releases. In D.C., Jack Smith is testifying that Trump willfully broke the law. In the Senate, there's a 52-47 war powers vote against his Venezuela campaign. And in Texas, a federal court says his hand-picked map is likely unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. It all adds up to a pattern. When Trump pushes as far as he wants, independent institutions, courts, prosecutors, sometimes even Republicans, are starting to push back. Finally, it shows how risky Trump's style of politics has become for his own party. He doesn't just play hardball, he tells them to light the stadium on fire. Texas Republicans followed him into a mid-decade redistricting scheme that was obviously going to attract lawsuits. They were told it was necessary to save the House. They passed it. They took the heat. And now, at least for 2026, they can't even use it. Meanwhile, Democrats are hyped, donors are paying attention, and a Democrat in a Trump plus 17 district is one runoff away from flipping a seat. So when you ask, Trump Republicans lose big in Texas court, we did all this and still might lose the House? The answer is, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. They tried to game the system for him. The court's called foul. The map is blocked. The firewall is cracked. And now, instead of quietly cruising through Texas in 2026, Trump and his allies are staring at a state where every close race, every court ruling, every surprise upset could be the one that cost them the House and opens the door to the very impeachments they were trying so hard to avoid.